then ran for governor in 1998, and that was a year that, if anybody remembers, you know, we've had, George Voinovich was, at the time, he was just coming off as our governor. He was governor for 8 years. And, you know, when you think times are good, I think Ohio was sort of just plodding along. And George Voinovich there's term limits, he can't run for re-election. So Bob Taft, who was the Secretary of State, nobody really knew who Bob Taft was, and he decides he's going to run. And I think most people thought he had no record, but he had a 100-year name recognition because of his family's legacy. And I think most people thought they were really voting that time for a third term for George Voinovich, and not knowing anything about Bob Taft. And so Lee lost that election, but that was the closest election for any governor's race in the last 25 years. He lost by less than 3 percentage points. That was a very tough loss. And that was, you know, one of those political tsunamis that every Democrat, you know, we all experienced it. So after that, you know, he went back to his law practice, and Lee was a partner at Hahn Lozier, downtown Cleveland. And after he lost that election, he went back to his law practice, and he had this beautiful office. He was sitting, it's in the BP building, sitting up on the 33rd floor, and he's looking out. He has this incredible view of Jacobs Field and the river, and it's just beautiful. And that was the highlight of his day, that was it, looking at the view. And there was not much more than that. And he called me up and he said, I need you to come here. So I left my office and went over to his office. He said, look at this view. I said, I know, it's pretty breathtaking. He said, it's not enough. This isn't what I'm about. I need to really be doing something where I'm giving back. So he walked away from his law practice and he joined the Center for Families and Children as the president and CEO. Center for Families and Children in Cleveland is the largest nonprofit agency that does direct service for families and children. They have a father's reentry program where people come back from prison and then they try through this father's program to teach them how to be parents. There's a program, Rap Art, where they work with children and all over the county, and what they do is they teach children how to handle whatever their issues are at home and to express themselves through art and through music. And he laughed because his view, now he gave up this view, he's on the 2nd floor, his office, and it overlooks a parking lot. He says, look at this view. It's fabulous. He was so gratified. And you know, it's important for, he served in this position for 7 years at the Center for Families and Children. And what's really important is if you have a public official who has been in government the whole time and has never had an opportunity to do the work that so many of you do, so many of us, they never really quite understand what we need. And those 7 years really put the rubber to the road for Lee. That's an expression, I think that's an expression. But it's where the rubber meets the road, that's the expression. And he, for many years, wrote legislation in Columbus, passed legislation, but the first time he was actually able to understand the legislation that he wrote because he was living it, and he was trying to push it, and he understood how legislation should be written. One of the things a piece that he wrote was the hate crime in Ohio. That was a piece of his legislation that he wrote. And that started in 1985. There was a terrible act on the east side of Cleveland and Collinwood, where there was an African-American family whose home was burnt, and there was a swastika that was written and drawn on and left on their front lawn. So at the time, Mike White was a senator from the east side, and Lee was a senator, and Lee called Mike White and said, we need to, I want a partner in this legislation. Let's write this together, let's form this together. And so they did. And then as Attorney General, Lee had the incredible honor of taking a piece of his legislation, the hate crime law, and then having to defend it in front of the Ohio Supreme Court. And he won a particular case and defended that. He is so ready to be a United States Senator. The work that he has done with Governor Strickland, you know, when Governor Strickland asked Lee to join his ticket, this was back in February of 2006. And when Ted asked Lee to join his ticket, you know, Lee said to him that I'm not a ribbon cutter. You know, anybody in this room, if you can name, if anybody here can name 5 lieutenant governors, can anybody do that? Does anybody know? You know Lee Fisher's a lieutenant governor because every office that Lee holds, every time he's in a position, he raises the level of that particular position. He takes it and he puts so much into it. He has put so much meat on a position of lieutenant governor that there are people lining up that would like to be the lieutenant governor, and I think in the past, you know, you couldn't get anybody to do it. He was, you know, Ted asked him and said, I want you to be the director of the Department of Development. And so for the last 2.5 years, Lee has served in that role. When he announced in February that he was running for the United States Senate, he knew that, you know, the Department of Development is a 400-person department, agency. So he knew that he could not run the department and give it the attention that it needed. You really need a day-to-day person managing it. So he left that. He walked away from that. His portfolio, he's still in charge of economic development, but there's an interim director now. So he's not doing that piece because he felt too strongly about it, and he couldn't give it, obviously, the attention that he wanted. What else can I tell you about him? He's the father of 2 children. Jason, who's 25 years old. Jessica, who is just graduating. This is her last week of school. She's taking finals, and she's going to be going to Mount Union College. She's real happy about that. She's staying in Ohio. She's an Ohio girl. I think, you know, what I'd like you to do is to invite Lee back so that you can have an opportunity to hear from him. But, you know, I don't have a political stump speech to give. I just think that to have an opportunity for you to know a little bit about who I am, where I came from, where Lee came from, and, you know, puts a better picture on the things that are important to us.